She never expected that a normal day at the park would turn into the most terrifying moment of her life. 12-year-old Lily adored her canine dog, Shadow, a retired service dog who had survived missions most people couldn't even imagine. But none of that mattered to the boys who grabbed him when Lily stepped away for only a minute. Four teenage boys stood around Shadow, laughing while one of them held electric clippers. Her brave, loyal canine companion, her protector, was trembling. His fur had been shaved off in patches, his skin cut and bleeding. Lily fell to her knees, crying, hugging Shadow as he whimpered in confusion. She screamed for help, but the boys only smirked. They thought it was a harmless joke. They didn't know the truth. Because the moment Lily's terrified cry ripped through the air, the entire park went silent. The man running toward her wasn't just her father. He was a Delta Force commander, a man trained to stay calm in war zones, but nothing prepared him for seeing his daughter sobbing over her injured dog. And what happened next? No one saw it coming. Stay with us. This amazing story will leave you shocked. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Lily was 12, small for her age, but she walked with a quiet confidence because Shadow was always by her side. Shadow wasn't just any dog. He was a retired K9, trained to protect, detect danger, and stay calm no matter what. But with Lily, he was gentle as a baby. His eyes softened every time she wrapped her arms around him, and his tail thumped against the floor whenever she called his name. Every afternoon after school, Lily and Shadow walked to the park together. She would sit under the same old tree, doing her homework, while Shadow lay beside her, keeping watch like it was still his duty. People often smiled seeing them together. They looked like a pair that life had glued together for a reason. To Lily, Shadow wasn't a dog. He was her best friend, her guardian, the only one who understood her on days when the world felt too loud. And for Shadow, Lily was the first person who made him feel safe, even after everything he had seen in his K9 years. Their bond was unbreakable. At least, that's what Lily believed. But the park wasn't peaceful for everyone. A group of teenage boys had recently started hanging around near the playground, loud, wild, and always looking for someone to tease. They were older than Lily, taller too, and they seemed to enjoy making others uncomfortable. Whenever Lily walked by, they whispered jokes, pointed at Shadow, and laughed like they owned the place. At first, Lily tried to ignore them. Shadow would gently nudge her hand, as if reminding her, "I'm here, don't worry." But the boys' teasing grew bolder. They mocked Shadow's calm behavior, calling him slow, old, and useless. One even pretended to bark at him just to make his friends laugh. Shadow never reacted. He simply stood close to Lily, watching the boys with steady eyes. But the boys mistook his patience for weakness, and that misunderstanding planted a dangerous idea in their minds. They wanted to prove they could mess with anything, even a trained K9. That afternoon, the sun was warm, and Lily was laughing as Shadow chased a ball across the grass. Everything felt normal, safe. But then Lily realized she had forgotten her water bottle by the fountain. "Stay, Shadow. I'll be right back," she said, giving him a quick pat before jogging away. The moment she disappeared behind the trees, the bullies moved in. Shadow sensed something wrong. He stood up, alert, but the boys surrounded him, blocking every escape. One of them pulled out a buzzing electric shaver, grinning. "Let's give the hero dog a new look," he joked. Before Shadow could step back, they grabbed him and started shaving chunks of his fur. His skin reddened, tiny cuts forming where the blades scraped too hard. Shadow whimpered, soft, confused, hurting. The boys only laughed louder. When Lily returned and saw him, she froze. The world around her blurred. Shadow stood trembling, half-shaved, bleeding in patches. Lily screamed, dropping to her knees as she wrapped her arms around him, tears pouring down her face. But the bullies? They just smirked, like it was all one big joke. Lily was still crying into Shadow's neck when she heard footsteps rushing across the grass. She didn't need to look up, she knew that stride anywhere. Her father, David, had arrived. Moments earlier, he had been parking nearby, planning to surprise Lily with ice cream. But the moment he saw his daughter shaking and Shadow injured, his entire expression changed. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He just went completely silent. David's calm, controlled steps toward the bullies made every one of them inch backward. They had expected a scared parent, not a man whose eyes looked trained to read danger. David knelt beside Shadow, gently placing a hand on the dog's shoulder. His jaw tightened as he examined the cuts. Only then did he lift his head toward the boys. The laughter that once filled the park died instantly, because in that moment they realized this man was nothing like their fathers. David didn't raise his voice. He simply took out his phone and began recording everything: the boys' faces, Shadow's wounds, the shaver lying on the ground. The bullies shifted nervously, realizing this was no longer a harmless prank. Their confidence started to crumble. "Stay with Shadow, Lily," David said softly, keeping one hand steady on the dog while dialing the police. His calmness was more terrifying than anger. Within minutes, an officer arrived, taking one look at Shadow and immediately treating the situation as a serious offense. The boys' parents were called. They rushed to the park expecting to defend their sons, but the moment they saw the injuries, their expressions changed from annoyance to shock. David explained the incident in measured words, revealing nothing about his military past, yet his presence alone made everyone listen. Lily sat beside Shadow, wiping his wounds with trembling hands. David placed a reassuring arm around her shoulders, but inside he was already preparing for the next steps. This wasn't ending with an apology. Not anymore. At the vet clinic, Lily sat on a cold metal chair, her hands shaking as she watched the doctor examine Shadow. David stood behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder, though his own worry was written in the tightness of his jaw. The vet carefully parted the shaved patches, his expression growing more serious with each inch he inspected. "These cuts are deeper than they look," he murmured. "The blades scraped his skin hard, and the sudden shaving has exposed him to infection. We need to treat him immediately." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Is he going to be okay?" Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. The vet nodded slowly. "He will, but it's good you brought him now. A few more hours, and things could have gotten dangerous." Lily lowered her head, guilt washing over her. "I shouldn't have left him alone." David knelt in front of her. "This is not your fault, Lily. Shadow is strong. He's going to fight through this." But deep inside, he felt something he rarely allowed: fear. A week later, the bullies stood outside the local animal shelter, their heads lowered, their usual attitude gone. The police report, combined with the seriousness of Shadow's injuries, had led to strict consequences. Instead of simple punishment, the judge assigned them mandatory community service working with injured and abandoned animals. At first, the boys dragged their feet, treating it like another chore. But everything changed when they were asked to clean the cages of dogs rescued from abuse. One of the boys paused, staring at a small, trembling puppy with shaved patches and bruised skin. It looked almost exactly like Shadow had. Something broke inside him. For the first time, guilt replaced laughter. His eyes filled with tears as he gently reached into the cage, whispering an apology the puppy would never understand. By the end of the day, all three boys grew silent, truly silent. And for the first time, they understood the weight of what they had done. Shadow's recovery was slow, but every day brought a little more hope. His fur began to grow back in soft patches, and his tail, once still with pain, started wagging again when Lily entered the room. She sat beside him every evening, reading stories, brushing the healed parts of his coat, and whispering, "You're my hero, Shadow. You always were." David watched them, grateful that the bond between his daughter and her dog hadn't been broken, only strengthened. At school, Lily surprised everyone by giving a small speech about protecting animals and standing against cruelty. Her words were simple, but they touched everyone who listened. A few days later, the bullies approached her. No laughter, no attitude, just quiet apologies. Lily didn't fully trust them yet.